What if I told you there are countries you learned about in school that have literally vanished from the map? And I don't mean ancient civilizations lost to the mists of time. I'm talking about nations that were, not too long ago, major players on the world stage. They had armies, governments, and a seat at the international table. You've probably seen them in old atlases, but you won't find them on a modern map today. These aren't made-up lands or unrecognized micronations. They were real, internationally acknowledged countries that, for one reason or another, are now gone. Today we're looking at 15 nations that were once movers and shakers before they were wiped off the map. We'll uncover the stories of mighty empires, forgotten republics, and political unions that simply couldn't last. By the end, you'll see just how fragile and ever-changing the world's borders really are. Let's start with the titans that fell in the 20th century, empires whose collapse completely redrew the map of Europe. Number 15, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Kicking off our list is the enormous Austro-Hungarian Empire, a dual monarchy that controlled a huge chunk of Central Europe from 1867 to 1918. This sprawling, multi-ethnic empire was a true global power, but the catastrophic defeat of World War I was the final nail in its coffin. Nationalism among its many ethnic groups, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Croats, and others, had been simmering for decades and finally boiled over. The empire shattered with stunning speed in the fall of 1918. From its ashes rose a bunch of new or reborn nations, including Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and parts of what would become Yugoslavia, Poland, and Romania. On November 11, 1918, the last Habsburg emperor, Karl I, issued a proclamation stepping back from state affairs, ending over 600 years of his family's rule. Number 14, the Ottoman Empire. A longtime rival of Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire was another giant brought to its knees by World War I. For over 600 years, from 1299 to 1922, this empire was a powerhouse, stretching across Southeast Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But by the early 20th century it was known as the sick man of Europe, weakened by internal conflicts and outside pressure. Siding with the Central Powers in World War I was its last fatal mistake. After its defeat, the empire was dismantled by the victorious Allied powers. The Turkish War of Independence then led to the creation of the modern Republic of Turkey in 1922, while the rest of its vast territories were carved up, fundamentally reshaping the Middle East as we know it today. Yugoslavia, which means the land of the South Slavs, was a country born from the rubble of the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires after World War I. It existed in a few different forms from 1918 until it started to break apart in the early 1990s. For most of the Cold War, its leader, Josip Broz Tito, steered a unique path of non-aligned communism, holding together a complex federation of 6 republics. But after Tito died in 1980, economic problems and rising nationalism tore the nation apart. A series of brutal wars led to its violent disintegration, creating 7 new nations: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and the state of Kosovo, whose independence, declared in 2008, is not universally recognized. The name Prussia probably brings to mind images of militaristic discipline and efficiency. Starting as a small duchy in 1525, it grew into a powerful European kingdom and was the driving force behind the unification of Germany in 1871. In many ways, Prussia was Germany. But that very same association with militarism became its undoing. After World War II, the Allied powers decided that Prussianism was at the root of German aggression and had to be destroyed for the sake of future peace. In 1947, the state of Prussia was formally abolished. Its territory was divided up, becoming parts of modern Germany, Poland, and Russia's Kaliningrad Oblast. Not every country vanishes in a war. Some are born from bold ideas that just don't stand the test of time. For a brief, shining moment, the dream of a single, unified pan-Arab state seemed real. In 1958, Egypt and Syria merged to form the United Arab Republic, driven by the charisma of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser and a powerful wave of Arab nationalism. Cairo became the capital, and Nasser its president. But the dream didn't last long. The union was dominated by Egypt from the start, and many Syrians grew to resent feeling like a junior partner. Just 3.5 years later, a military coup in Damascus in September 1961 caused Syria to secede, and the union was over. Egypt, funny enough, kept calling itself the United Arab Republic all the way until 1971. In the early 19th century, the revolutionary hero Simon Bolivar had a grand vision, a single, powerful republic stretching across northern South America. This vision became Gran Colombia, formed in 1819, uniting what we now know as Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Panama. Bolivar hoped this nation would be a beacon of stability and a counterweight to European powers, but the dream was just too big. Deep regional tensions, political infighting, and the simple challenge of governing such a massive territory proved to be too much. Bolivar himself resigned in 1830, and by 1831, the Federation had dissolved into the independent nations of Venezuela, Ecuador, and New Granada, which later became Colombia. Born in 1918 from the remains of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Czechoslovakia was a union of two very similar yet distinct peoples, the Czechs and the Slovaks. For decades, they existed as one country in the heart of Europe. After surviving Nazi occupation and communist rule, the country found democracy in the Velvet Revolution of 1989. But this newfound freedom also let old tensions resurface. Arguments over the country's name, its political structure, and the speed of economic reforms highlighted a growing divide. In the end, they decided a peaceful separation was the best way forward. In what's famously known as the Velvet Divorce, the country officially and smoothly split into two on January 1, 1993, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. All right, we're more than halfway through our trip across the forgotten maps of history. From massive empires to ambitious political projects, these stories are a powerful reminder of how fluid borders really are. If you're finding these vanished histories as fascinating as I do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration of our incredible world. Now let's get back to the countries that aren't there anymore. Sometimes a country doesn't collapse but is absorbed into another, vanishing from the map through a merger or unification. For 41 years, from 1949 to 1990, Germany was split in two. The German Democratic Republic, or East Germany, was a communist state aligned with the Soviet Union, separated from the West by the Iron Curtain and most famously, the Berlin Wall. After decades of Cold War tension, a wave of peaceful protests in 1989 led to the stunning fall of the Berlin Wall. This single event set off a chain reaction. East Germany held its first free elections, and pro-unification parties won easily. Less than a year after the wall came down, on October 3, 1990, East Germany was officially dissolved, and its territory was reunified with West Germany, ending 45 years of division. Another casualty of the Cold War was the Republic of Vietnam, better known as South Vietnam. Established in 1955, it was a capitalist state backed by the United States, locked in a brutal war with communist North Vietnam and its Viet Cong allies. The Vietnam War divided the world and left a deep scar on a generation. After the Paris Peace Accords in 1973 led to the withdrawal of American troops, the South was left exposed. In the spring of 1975, North Vietnamese forces launched a final, overwhelming attack. On April 30, 1975, tanks crashed through the gates of the presidential palace in Saigon, marking the fall of the city and the end of South Vietnam, which was officially reunified with the North the following year. You might think of Sardinia as just an Italian island, but it was once the heart of a powerful kingdom that led the charge for Italian unification. The Kingdom of Sardinia, also known as Piedmont Sardinia, became the engine of the Risorgimento in the mid-19th century, the movement to unite the patchwork of states on the Italian peninsula. Led by King Victor Emmanuel II and his brilliant Prime Minister, Camillo di Cavour, the kingdom used sharp diplomacy and key military victories to expand its power. In 1861, the Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed. In a way, Sardinia didn't so much disappear as it did transform, sacrificing its own identity to give birth to the modern nation of Italy. Located off the coast of East Africa, the Sultanate of Zanzibar was once a major maritime and trading power, famous for its role in the spice and slave trades. After gaining independence from Britain in December 1963, the island nation had a violent revolution just 1 month later that overthrew its government. Seeing a chance to create regional stability, President Julius Nyerere of neighboring Tanganyika proposed a union. On April 26, 1964, the two nations merged, creating the United Republic of Tanzania that very same day. Our final countries are a mix of the forcefully overthrown and those whose independence has been erased from most modern maps. For 4 chaotic years, from 1861 to 1865, a breakaway republic existed inside the United States. The Confederate States of America was formed by 11 southern states that seceded from the Union, with the preservation of slavery as the primary cause. This act kicked off the American Civil War, the deadliest conflict in the nation's history. The Confederacy had its own government, money, and army, but it was never officially recognized as a legitimate country by any foreign power. After 4 brutal years of war, the Confederacy was defeated, its government collapsed, and the states were brought back into the United States during the Reconstruction era. Long before it became America's 50th state, Hawaii was a sovereign and internationally recognized kingdom. Established in 1795, the Kingdom of Hawaii had its own monarchy, constitution, and treaties with other countries. But by the late 19th century, American business interests, especially sugar planters, had gained huge economic and political power. In 1893, a group of these businessmen, backed by U.S. Marines, staged a coup and overthrew Queen Liliuokalani. They set up a new government with the goal of being annexed by the United States. Despite resistance from many native Hawaiians, the U.S. formally annexed the islands in 1898, ending Hawaii's time as an independent nation. Tucked away in the Himalayas between India and Tibet, the Kingdom of Sikkim was a tiny, independent monarchy for over 300 years. It managed to keep its sovereignty as a protectorate of India for many years after India became independent. But by the 1970s, the Sikkimese monarchy was facing internal opposition and pressure from its powerful neighbor. In 1975, the Indian army moved in, disarmed the palace guards, and placed the king under house arrest. A controversial referendum was then held, in which the people voted to get rid of the monarchy and join India. With that, Sikkim was formally annexed and became India's 22nd state, and its name vanished from the list of the world's sovereign countries. Perhaps one of the most controversial entries on our list is Tibet. This high-altitude nation on the roof of the world has a long and complex history as a unique Buddhist theocracy. After the fall of China's Qing dynasty, Tibet declared its independence in 1913. For nearly 40 years it operated with de facto independence, issuing its own money, maintaining an army, and dealing with other nations. However, this independence was never formally recognized by most world powers, and China never accepted it. In 1951, the newly formed People's Republic of China invaded and annexed the territory, asserting it was a historical part of China. The Dalai Lama, Tibet's spiritual and political leader, fled into exile in 1959. Today, while a government in exile maintains its claim to sovereignty, Tibet is internationally recognized as an autonomous region within China, its former status as an independent nation remaining a point of heated debate. From the battlefields of World War I to the peaceful Velvet Divorce, the stories of these 15 countries prove that the political map isn't set in stone. It's a living document constantly being redrawn by war, revolution, and the powerful tides of history. Empires that seemed like they would last forever can crumble in just a few years, and nations can merge or dissolve in the blink of an eye. The world we see today is just a snapshot in time. The borders we take for granted might one day seem as distant and historical as those of Prussia or the Ottoman Empire. Which of these vanished nations surprised you the most? Are there any former countries you think should have been on this list? Let us know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe for more.